Texas Tech is college football's kryptonite. If you have watched anything that they've done over these last 12 weeks, it has been nothing short of remarkable for their team. The only game that they lost was, of course, against Arizona State, where 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝗧𝗓 had to actually come in and step in place for Behren Morton while he was out with an injury. I think Behren was actually supposed to be out longer than he actually was, and then 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘂𝗧𝗓 ended up getting hurt. And then they had my boy Mitch Griffiths. If anybody remembers Mitch Griffiths, he was the actual quarterback for Wake Forest a couple years ago, and now he's the backup here at Texas Tech. But yeah, man, it seemed to have, I don't want to say turn their ugly head. It's turning ugly for a lot of other teams when this team is firing all cylinders. And it was kind of, I don't want to say a slow burn, but it's almost like just watching Voltron just come together, right? Like the pieces are starting to fit all at the right moment. And it kind of starts with that defense, which we'll get into a little later. But, Behren Morton comes back off of that injury, and, by all accounts, they're winning games and things are looking decent. And, he, at the beginning of the season, a lot of people just didn't want to mention that he was in Heisman contention. Like, if you looked at his numbers through the first 4 weeks of the season, it was hard pressed to say that, yeah, this guy doesn't deserve to be, in Heisman talks. And, he's a really good quarterback. And I think going into this draft, if he decides to declare, I think these are one of the quarterbacks that we should really be looking at in the NFL draft, which we're not there yet. When the end of December, January hits, we'll start to get into more of that. As y'all know here, ECG is the ultimate place where you come in and learn about the prospects for the NFL draft. But also on the other side of that, when we're breaking down the offense, we got to think about a top 20 running back. I believe he's at like number 16, 17, something somewhere in there in total yardage, which is Cameron Dickey. But Cameron Dickey's one of those old school type of running backs that's going to slap you in the mouth every time he runs the ball. And this offense goes how he goes, it seems like, as of late. And it's almost like the running game and the passing game have now made this marriage that's kind of hard to stop. And then you got two receivers in 𝗕𝘂𝘂𝘂𝗀𝘂𝘂 and Caleb Douglas, who both have over 500 yards receiving at this point in time. And both receivers are in the top 96 of wide receivers as far as receiving touchdowns. And so you look at their numbers versus a lot of other guys in the country. I believe they have a 400-yard receiver, which we'll get into here a little later to make a point, and Reggie Virgil, who's been really, really good. But we'll get to him here in a little bit. But this whole team is coming together, and both of those receivers are really, really good. And then you go over to the defensive side of the ball, which is where most of the money gets made for Texas Tech. And this is why I think in college football right now that they're the kryptonite to a lot of teams, and they should be feared. Like Jacob Rodriguez, if you don't have him at least getting a Heisman vote right now in your Heisman, you're really kidding yourself. The guy's statistics are great, and if he's not the best linebacker in the country, he's 1B on a lot of people's list. There may be another guy that may be more talented to him, but as far as his numbers say that he's the best. Shout out to my man Austin Romaine down there at Kansas State. He gets a couple votes from me too. But then you look at the whole unit that's just been going crazy, and it's mostly that linebacker and defensive edge crew. You have Romello Height, and then David Bailey, who I believe has like 12 or 13 sacks at this point. He's been going absolutely haywire. Ben Roberts has been a solid addition too, being one of the leaders in tackles for this team. Look, this whole defensive front is absolutely remarkable, man. And a lot of these guys are guys that have been there and stuck with Texas Tech and were recruited there. And so you go over to their head coach, Joey McGuire. He's doing something that Coach Prime in Colorado can't seem to do. Not only do they go in the portal, have some of the best and highest rated, portal classes, but they also build from within. They get the depth where they need to get the depth, and they move their team forward. They progressively move their team forward, right? They get guys like we mentioned before in Reggie Virgil. He was their wide receiver number 3, 400 yards, 400 plus yards and 5 touchdowns at this point. and he comes from the MAC. He comes from up there in Miami of Ohio, and he's been an awesome piece for them. David Bailey, the guy that we talked about, that's been a to me at this point in time, he might be better than Ruben Bain, and a lot of people are not talking about it. But he comes over from Stanford. Then you get Romello Height. We mentioned him, the other edge rusher. He comes over from Georgia Tech, so he makes a progressive move as well at this point in time, as far as, I guess, if you want to look at the rankings. And then you get defensive tackles and Lee Hunter that comes over from UCF that's in that transfer within the same division, and they reach back out into the MAC and they go and get Skylar Gill-Howard from Northern Illinois, who was part of that crew last year that upset Notre Dame. And so, as a whole, Texas Tech is just full of superstars, homegrown recruits, and a program that likes to build within, and then also, has a lot of depth on their team. If you want to get into more of how good their defense is, I got the numbers here, man, and it's pretty staggering on how good that they've actually been this season in particular. Defensive EPA on early downs, they're number 1. Third and fourth down success rate allowed, they're number 12 in the country. Rushing yards allowed per game, they're 3rd. They only allow 73.8 yards a game. Defensive stop rate, they're number 2 in the country, 82.1. Forced fumbles, they have 16 and they're number 1. To me, this is the perfect blend of a great defense. When they say defense is your best offense, this is like the best this is the best combination of both. They don't have a overpowered offense, but they have an offense that's good enough where you have to respect them. And then their defense gets the other offense off the field to put the ball back in their hands to continuously give them chances. They're not afraid to take chances downfield with Baron Morton, and as you could tell with, 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝘀𝗀 in the boys, they've been really good at that. Right now, they're number 3 in passing yards in the Big 12. Number 1 being those guys up there at Baylor, right? Sawyer Robertson and the boys are going crazy. And this is one other thing to point out. They play with heart. They play with passion, all that intangible stuff. When describing the team, they have all that. But one thing that I wanted to note is, like, Baron Morton's been banged up for 2 years straight. Remember, he was recovering from a shoulder injury he played with last year. Going into this year, there's a lot of question marks around, like, is he fully healthy? Gets himself hurt again this season, and then still continuously trying to put that team on his back. I am a super fan of what Baron and those guys like to do, right? So as long as he takes the mantle and moves it forward, and Cameron Dickey can keep it up, and their defensive back unit can just play good enough to shut down those receivers game to game, we might be looking at a deep push from a Texas Tech team that I told you guys at the beginning of the season that I was really excited to watch. And a lot of that is actually coming to fruition, and it's pretty exciting to see. So we'll see what happens moving forward. But to me, they are the kryptonite of college football. And not to add insult to injury here for a lot of people, but just think about where we are right now in the landscape of college football, and tell me that the Big 12 just doesn't have they have the best quarterbacks, and it just reminds me so much of the Pac-12 a couple years ago before all those teams that transferred out. It's a great thing to see, and I'm excited to watch their full progression for the rest of the year for sure.